For our first instalment of this new Cities in Video Games series on the Any Button to Start channel, I took you, dear viewer, on a guided and scenic tour through my hometown of London, England. Though, if I'm being honest, there is another city that has my heart just as much as my place of origin. Tokyo is the capital city of Japan, and if you've watched my videos for any amount of time, you will know that that's a country I have a long-standing love affair with. I have even spent some time living in Tokyo, or at least adjacent to it, so I would like to think that I know the city well enough to take you through Tokyo in video games. Before we start, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the Any Button to Start channel, and let me know any other cities you would like to see in this new series. Thanks, and let's get on with it. Unlike my London video, we will not be going through today's games in chronological order of release, but instead, each game on this list will capture something different about Tokyo, and I have arranged them in the order that feels right, so just go with me on this. With all that in mind, our first game is actually our latest game to be released. 2022's Ghostwire Tokyo comes to us from Tango Gameworks, the studio founded by Japanese horror game legend Shinji Mikami, creator of Resident Evil, Dino Crisis and The Evil Within. Though the spooks aren't what we're here to talk about today. No, we're interested in the sights. And oh, does Ghostwire Tokyo got 'em. This being such a modern game, it might not be a surprise to you when I say that Ghostwire Tokyo has the most visceral and immersive recreation of Japan's capital that we will be studying today. It's hard for me to tell if it's the first-person perspective, the virtuosic implementation of ray tracing and general visual polish, or the painstaking accuracy of Ghostwire's Tokyo map that makes the game feel so authentic and realised. Though now that I've said that out loud, I'm coming to understand that it's probably a mix of all three. Like many of the other games coming up, Ghostwire depicts a post-disaster Tokyo, and hence is far less crowded than the real place. This allows the player to really appreciate the city as an architectural maze, and the fact that most rooftops are accessible and explorable gives the player multiple perspectives on the city and its atmosphere. What I think I love the most about Ghostwire's evocation of Tokyo is how it uses the cramped back alleys and winding footpaths of the city to enhance its horror. The designers clearly thought about ways to extract scares straight from the city itself, instead of just lining the streets with monsters and calling it a day. One of my favourite things about Tokyo and Japan as a whole is their appreciation and celebration of subculture. It isn't too rare to see fully done up punks or goths walking around some of the trendier areas of Tokyo. And of course, the city is famous for its bright and colourful Harajuku fashion subculture. Though, one of the most dedicated but oft mentioned subcultures within Japan, and hence Tokyo, is, of course, street racers. Now, I have before gone into rather painstaking detail covering the history and legacy of Japan's original street racing scene in my feature-length docu-review of Racing Lagoon. So, if you would like the full story behind that legend of Japanese youth culture, go check that video out when you're done here. For now, all you must know is that Japan's history of obsessive car culture bred a generation of bored teenagers souping up road cars to then race against each other down Japan's tortuous mountain paths and across its sprawling expressways. Of course, many games have attempted to capture various elements of Japanese car culture, but for my money, the only one that captures the slick, oily joy of illegally racing Toyotas and Supras through Tokyo's elevated highways is Tokyo Xtreme Racer. This arcade racing series, originally for Sega's Dreamcast console, is a time capsule of early 2000s Tokyo racing culture, and to someone attempting to learn more about that specific subculture, I couldn't think of a better series to recommend. Tokyo Xtreme Racers 1, 2 and 3 allow you to race and tune a whole host of Japanese automobiles through Tokyo's winding expressway system, and allows the player to bask in the speed and ferocity of Tokyo city living. During my video covering London in video games, I included Mario and Sonic at the London 2012 Olympic Games as a signifier of a formative and extremely exciting time of my childhood. Mario and Sonic at the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games is on here for a similar, though at the same time very different reason. This game, of course, does signify an ultra-specific point in Tokyo history. However, the only problem is, well, it never happened. Yes, that's right. The very event this game was designed to commemorate got cancelled in between the game's release and the event's scheduled start, due to, oh god, what was it again? Oh yeah, it was cancelled because of a once-in-a-lifetime worldwide pandemic, something no one saw coming. I find this game so fascinating due to this fact that it is celebrating an event that would never take place in our world. There were no Olympic Games in 2020 at all, let alone in Tokyo. So what we're left with is a product that sits in the oddest of positions, still being on sale and unchanged from its 2020 branding, though now supposedly meant to be commemorating an event that actually took place in 2021. It's rather neat if I do say so myself. On the gameplay front, Tokyo 2020 is, at its core, just more London 2012, with all the same events playing pretty much identically to their Wii counterparts. However, it is what is built on top of that core that makes 2020 a marked improvement from any other Mario and Sonic Olympic title. Basically, every returning minigame has at least one new control scheme to choose from. All newly added events are accounted for, including skateboarding, surfing and sports climbing, and the passion for the city in which the games take place is amplified greatly, almost certainly since Sega, the game's developer, is based in Tokyo and obviously has deep ties to the city and its culture. This passion is displayed most enthusiastically with the inclusion of the Tokyo 1964 game mode, a set of 2D pixel minigames based on events from the 1964 Tokyo Olympic Games. It even uses 8-bit Mario franchise sprites and 16-bit ones for the Sonic cast. This game mode feels like a warm and gooey love letter to the city of Tokyo and its history as a worldwide cultural hub. And I, for one, think that's pretty cool. Now, we move on to a series of games that genuinely couldn't be a more drastic swerve from the bubbly likes of Mario and Sonic at the Olympics. This is Shin Megami Tensei. SMT is a 3-decade-deep legend of a JRPG franchise, with close to 100 games falling under its wide franchise umbrella, with many of those games taking place in good old Tokyo. Well, to be honest, I wouldn't describe most of SMT's depictions of Japan's capital as good, because a majority of the time Tokyo is featured in one of these games, you can bet to see its destruction, or at least its transformation into something a lot uglier than cherry blossoms, clean streets and konbinis. Although SMT often depicts ruined Tokyos, I still feel it captures something intriguing about the city in the real world. It feels as though the art of longtime series character designer Kazuma Kaneko contains the dark chic of 90s Tokyo fashion, and this carries over into the game's recreation of the city. SMT's Tokyos, even if depicted rather faithfully, all have an eerie and foreboding undertone to them. And when many of those recreations break out into apocalypse, it only feels natural for a place that already felt so uncanny. I also just can't get the image out of my head of all of Kaneko's character designs wearing late 90s Yohji Yamamoto. I mean, SMT really does just capture that Tokyo coolness. I don't even know what else to say. There is another way in which SMT adjacent games depict Tokyo, and it's far less dark yet far more relatable than the previously mentioned depictions. In Tokyo Mirage Sessions, though most famously and successfully in Persona 5, Tokyo is viewed through the eyes of high schoolers, and hence takes a far more charming and wondrous tone. Persona 5 really sells to the player Tokyo's busy and rushed atmosphere, especially with the packed train rides the player must take to school and these fantastically designed loading screens depicting crowds passing the screen. One of Persona 5's most explored themes is that of time and the management thereof, and these flourishes to its recreation of Tokyo really help keep that theme in the front of players' minds. Prepare yourself for another post-apocalyptic recreation of Japan's capital, because our next game is Tokyo Jungle. Yes, the 2012 PS3 exclusive survival game where you play as household pets and zoo animals repopulating a dystopian and derelict Tokyo. Quite the elevator pitch for a game, though Tokyo Jungle lives up to its bizarre premise and is an immersive and intense survival experience. Tokyo Jungle's recreation of its titular city depicts the town reclaimed by nature, both of the plant and animal varieties. The iconic Shibuya crossing is overrun with greenery. The concrete splits to make way for shrubbery and grass, and wildlife totally foreign to Japan's climate roam the city's streets. There is a quietness to this Tokyo divorced from human life, and I feel that this piece really emulates the tranquil nature of somewhere like the Meiji Jingu Shrine in real-life Tokyo. A bastion of peace and calmness in the heart of Tokyo, just a few meters away from one of the city's busiest shopping streets, Takashita Street. Needless to say, Tokyo Jungle's peopleless city captures the juxtaposition between modern, busy-looking architecture and the quietness of being alone in such a large place. Our final series to be covered in this video is one of the most consistently brilliant and persistently expectation-defying franchises being released today. That series is Ryuga Gotoku, or as we know it in the West, Yakuza, plus Judgment. From 2005 on the PS2 to 2022 on the PS5, Yakuza and its comparatively new spin-off series, Judgment, have been refining and evolving this same 2 square miles of Tokyo in every game released. Those 2 square miles are known as Kamurocho, a fictionalized depiction of Tokyo's real-life entertainment district, Kabukicho. Just like its IRL counterpart, Kamurocho has a history of organised crime, which is obviously the focus of a series dubbed Yakuza. Though the overarching story of at least the first 6 games in the series do not at any point really show the Yakuza as a thriving business. Instead, the story of the games takes cues from real-life Japan and its modern crackdown on organised crime. Yakuza as a series depicts the downfall of a once powerful, though unwanted institution of Japanese and especially Tokyo culture. The stories told within these games are of men without a place in a world that is rapidly outgrowing them. And the most brilliant part of all of this is how the series uses the 2 square miles of Kamurocho to examine and reinforce this. Every game in the series takes place in a different year, though most of the mainline games take place in the year of their release, or thereabouts, so each title is usually set about a year after the last. This natural, incremental passage of time can be seen in the architecture and general look and feel of Kamurocho. As you play through the series, you will slowly see the district get cleaned up. Newer, more modern businesses will replace the old ones, there will be less homeless people about, and you will generally start to feel those 2 square miles become a lot safer and prettier, though a lot more foreign to the men that make up the series' stories. The fact that Kamurocho is featured in pretty much every game in the series means that the player becomes extremely familiar with the district and its layout, meaning they will notice those small changes and hopefully register the subtext they serve to deliver. Then, when the devs decide to make a drastic change, like setting the game all the way back in the 1980s, that subtext gets promoted to straight theming, as Yakuza 0 uses its 80s bubble economy era Kamurocho to show the rise that precedes the series-long fall of the fictional and real-life Yakuza, whilst also paralleling the economic fall Japan would experience in reality that would lead to the fictional Kamurocho looking so derelict and sketchy in the first game's 2005. What I'm really trying to say is that the Yakuza series uses its Tokyo setting to help tell its stories. Just as much as Kazuma Kiryu, Ichiban Kasuga, and Takayuki Yagami are characters within Yakuza and Judgment, so is the city of Kamurocho, and hence Tokyo as a whole. So, there it is. 6 very different versions of Tokyo throughout modern video game history. Although, of course, Tokyo is a place I would like to visit more often in real life, for the time being, whilst that currently isn't possible, I have these adaptations of the city to hold me over. And hopefully, you all in the comments will have plenty of other examples of recreations of Tokyo in video games. Our next stop on this tour will be New York City. So please strap in and subscribe to Any Button to Start. Thanks for watching.